Hey, hello everybody, and welcome to this crossover episode of The Real Math of Business with Alena Bennett and the Magical Learning Podcast. I'm Jez from the Magical Learning Podcast. Alena, you're on this podcast as well, so hello Alena, how are you going?
Really well, thanks, Jez. Great to be here. Can't wait to do this episode.
Great. So we're doing a crossover episode because we figured we were having you on anyway, but our podcast, I think they can tackle some similar topics sometimes. So we thought, why not bring each other to each other, bring our audiences to each other so they've now got a bigger community. We've got a bigger community, and I think that we've got audiences that are really going to love what we've got to talk about here today. So I'm really excited to do this crossover episode with you, Alena.
I can't wait. Let's do it.
All right. Well, Alena, let's start with you, I guess. How's your week been this week?
Well, I'll go a little bit more micro. I just spent about 45 minutes at the beach, literally, chatting to some friends on the deck there. And I think that kind of says everything. So I got there, the beach was closed because they had a shark sighting. But a couple of my buddies were there. So we just caught up, and then I went, hang on a second, I've got to go do a podcast. And, you know, I shared that with full transparency because I reckon we're here to learn lots about real math of business and magical learning, but we've always got to have fun doing it.
That's it. Absolutely. And I feel like for our international listeners, you've really painted a picture of Australia where you can just head down to the beach and there's a shark there. You never know. No, great to have you on, and excited to do this crossover episode, Alena. Well, let's check in with some of the regular team here as well for the Magical Learning Podcast. We've got Graham, our CEO, on. Graham, how's your week been?
Hey, Jez. I've had a good week. Thank you. Thanks for checking in. Back in class this week, so running workshops with one of our clients, and as I mentioned in the warm up to today's session, a little rusty on day one, but managed to convince others in the session that I wasn't rusty, which is a good thing. Like Alena, a little, I have also come from something else to make the podcast today. I was not at the beach. And thanks for the invite, Alena. I appreciate it.
You're welcome.
I was repairing somebody's computer, which is a lot more fun and less painful than sharks. By the way, folks, if you happen to live overseas and you think, well, we really want to visit Australia, but is it true that there's lots of things that can kill you, like sharks? You can't even go for a swim in the ocean because there's something out there that's hungry. Fear not. You can always come and join us in inland Australia, where we're surrounded by nature, and the nearest beach is approximately 432 kilometres in a straight line away. And out where we are, you don't have to worry about sharks at all, just snakes and goannas and things.
Well, that's it. You can either go surfing the internet or surfing the waves. We've got options here in Australia. There's options from both of you there. So very excited to have you on, Graham.
Glad to be back. Thank you.
That's all right. And our Director of Learning, Danette, how are you going?
Yes. Yeah, good. I'm at the farm today, so very excited. It's 38 degrees, so a bit warm. And yeah, just very excited to be on, and can't wait for this conversation with Alena.
That's it. And for people watching the video on the YouTube, they can see you've got the special effects windswept effect going on there, Danette.
That is the fan that is keeping me cool on the veranda, because there is no air conditioning in this part of the house. So if I look a bit windswept, that is the fan.
That's the special effects budget right there.
Exactly.
No, that's great, Danette. Great to have you on.
Thanks,
now, Alena, no worries. Alena, we're so excited to have you on. And for people that are joining you from the magical learning side of things, Alena, you're a speaker, author, and leadership expert who works with chief executive officers and chief financial officers really to help them create universally investable companies where people serve people and the math just works. You've had a background in accounting. You've worked in the US. You've worked in Australia. You've got a podcast. Thank you so much for being on today. Is there anything else you wanted to add before we get into today's conversation for new listeners?
No, I think let's jump in. If there are any skeletons, I will share them as we go.
Great. Well, Alena, let's talk before we get into today's. Oh, you know what? I think Danette's question really teases us off nicely, talking about the real math of business. So, you know what, Danette, you've got a nice framing question about the real math of business, which is not only a philosophy, but it's a podcast. So I think you ask your questions, and Alena, you can just kind of take us away from there.
Thanks, Jez. And Alena, I always have two questions. My first one is, because I figured some of our listeners may not know this now, but they will after this discussion. Tell us about the concept of the real math of business, because I really love your concept, and I've figured our viewers and listeners will too.
Thanks, Danette. And, you've been a part of this journey to get to this point of the real math of business. So, because it is not a concept that has happened overnight, it is something that I've sort of, I didn't know really was a thing until probably about this time last year, if I'm really honest. And, like yourself, and as Jez mentioned, my background has been in accounting and finance, so lots of maths. And I wasn't the sharpest maths tool in the shed. But, I had this, I had one of those sliding door moments when I was in high school where, you've got to choose what university degree you want. And I went, well, actually, I'd really love to become the next physio of the Australian cricket team. But I'm probably not smart enough. So let's just hedge my bets and maybe do some commerce, And so it was basically physio and then commerce. Then, and this probably says a lot, I got into physio and went, I'll do commerce anyway, because then there are a lot more options out there. And so my point of sharing that is, I took the road into finance, commerce, accounting, because I thought it was the safer thing to do. It was more general. It would open myself up to broader options. And I did what you sometimes do when you're a little young and naive. You just kind of follow the wave. And where that wave took me was into an internship at one of the big four accounting firms, which then became a graduate degree, which is what then, started off the international travels and all the rest of it. I'll come back to this idea that I wasn't and still am not the sharpest finance or maths tool in the shed. However, I was very successful. And when I say successful, I got all the right scores, I got the promotions, all of those things. And, still to this day, I did not get them because I was the smartest person. I got them because I was able to have a conversation. And I had this narrative based on what I'd been told time and time again was, oh, you don't seem like the typical auditor. Why not? Because you smile, because you have a conversation. And I'm like, how can the bar be so low that someone who has half a brain is really not expected to smile, have a personality, or be able to have a conversation? So that's kind of the formative part of what kind of began and continued, that the thread, I guess, that began and continued through my career. I then moved out into corporate. And then I had, I guess, my first experience with consultants and the type of work that, consultants could do with around change and sort of implementation of innovation and all the rest of it. And then was asked to come into their business. And that then, I guess, was the start of my business and what I do today. Because of my background, I do a lot of work, still do a lot of work with chief financial officers. So our signature program, the CFO boardroom. What is very interesting, so we've been running that program for 6 years now. And it incorporates, one-on-one and group. So it kind of covers that, bespoke coaching and mentoring with the community, which we all know that anyone who's had a C-suite, it can be quite lonely, right? So it kind of has that opportunity to have rich conversations. What has become really clear to me is I could be sitting in a room and be spending every single day with the person in the organization that has the F in the name, finance, not the other F, finance in the name. Yet we could spend all of those conversations talking about people. I'm like, what's going on here? Whenever we'd go, how's the business going? Yeah, that's fine, but let's talk about the people. And I was like, there's something here. Because actually anyone who, and obviously, Danette, with your background, you know this as well, the maths when it comes to business is actually really simple. I do not know why they make it overly complex when you're going through high school and university, right? It's so simple. So I was like, why? Like, what's going on when the person in charge of the money is just obsessed about talking with people, as in all of the problems are people problems? But I love that, as I've sort of shared before, that has been my strong suit. And I guess over the years, there has been this undertone of the work and it, as I said to you, crystallized probably 12, 15 months ago into, hang on a second, there's a philosophy that I believe in this, and that is the real math of business is actually an important balance and function and interplay between people and math. It's not one or the other. You need money to have a business, but you also can't do business without people. And it's a really interesting concept to explore. And that's why I love having the podcast guests on, because it is almost a concept. It is almost a philosophy. I don't have an answer. What I love doing is learning about how this idea of the real math of business, not the maths that they teach you in uni, and not the maths that the investors and the stock exchange mandates, the real math of business. I love learning about what that is in every different context and company.
I love that. And Alena, you and I were both the smiling auditors. I got exactly the same comment when I was an auditor. You can't be an accountant, you smile too much.
That's it.
That's
How sad.
So my next one leads into that, where what are businesses missing if they're not really understanding the real math of business?
What do they miss? Well, I'll keep it started really simple. They miss a whole pile of cash. A whole pile of cash. Because if you don't do the people right, if you don't focus on the right maths, you will not make as much money as you can, right? So if you get really ruthless and you're really kind of money oriented, you're going to miss out on a whole pile of cash. From a people side of things, I think, again, I have a bit of a belief around this, and some people won't like it. We spend so much time at work. I believe that business has an opportunity to provide an environment to allow people to be the best version of themselves. And why people might not like that is that'll make some people want to vomit, and that's okay. But we quite often talk about the hours we spend at work. So why don't we just use those as vehicles to be the best version of ourselves? Why do we? And, this happens less and less, but, why do we still feel we have to turn up to work and pretend we're something we're not? That's just stupid. No offense. You cannot get the best out of somebody if they're not being themselves. So I think there's that sort of social opportunity that's missed as well. And if you believe, and I believe that business is really there to support the people, the staff, and the communities that they work in, if you believe in that, then I think, if people in the business are not working at their best, if you are not producing the numbers you need to produce, your communities and therefore society at a bigger level will suffer.
Great answer. I can't wait for the rest of the conversation. Thank you.
Me too. Thank you.
Thanks, Danette. And I forgot to mention, Danette was actually on The Real Math of Business. If you want to check out an episode from last year, it was actually one of the most popular episodes from 2025. So go check that out. The link will be in the description. If you want to see that conversation continue more about two smiling people with accounting degrees, you've got an interesting conversation there for sure. Graham, I'll throw to you. What was your question? And tell us a little bit about your thoughts so far.
What are some of the things that you've seen, some of the consequences for businesses and business owners and also their people when we end up at one extreme? So we're too focused on the people or too focused on the numbers, and we haven't really got that balance quite right. What are some of the things that can happen?
Well, it's a little bit like, is it called the Newton's cradle, the thing, that pendulum that does that? So it's a little bit like the Newton's cradle. So companies swing from side to side all of the time. And I think what typically happens, so they swing too far on the number side, they get focused on dollars, profit, all of those, weird and wonderful numbers. And we see what happens. There's burnout, there's resentment, there's layoffs, there's all of those things that happen to the people, right? And the irony, as we all know here, the irony of that is that all costs a lot of money. So in the end, you actually contribute to the problem. So that's what happens when we swing to the number side. And I think, if we think about the business landscape, maybe 10 plus years ago, there was definitely the focus on that. That was when we were still in that command and control style of leadership. As that style of leadership has started to phase out and we've started to adopt better leadership practices, what that has meant is a better appreciation of the human in the workplace, I guess. And, let's face it, I didn't get taught people anywhere. no one taught me how to deal with people. And, so my eldest daughter started year 9 this year, and she got to choose her electives for the first time. And she knew that she wanted to do Japanese. She knew she wanted to do visual design, but she didn't know what to do for the third one. And psychology was an option. And I said, you know what? The one thing you're always going to have to do, no matter what you're going to have to do in the future, is do things with people. So psychology would be a really helpful starting place. I digress. The point is that people generally do not know how to do people well because they're not taught it, and they are not intentional about it. It's a little bit like communication, and I know you guys are experts in this. We pretend we fall into this false sense of security that we are good at communicating because we've learned to talk since we were 18 months old, right? Leading and working with people is somewhat the same. So the other side of that Newton's pendulum is that we do people so much, and we kind of get all lovey, and we hold lots of town halls and workshops and offsites and all of those beautiful things. And then suddenly we realize we've got a bloated P&L, and we're not making money. So I think historically we've been too focused on money. I think as businesses have tried to course correct that, they've inadvertently swung to the other side. And I think so what we're seeing now in the marketplace is just a bit of a rebalancing, and I think that's okay.
Yeah, thank you. I really appreciate that. I was thinking, and I certainly don't want to put words in your mouth, but I'm sadly old enough to have been here when dirt was invented, and also to have a terrible sense of humour. And I came up with the idea, and I actually use it in a lot of my workshops, but I often have to frame it beforehand, that people are weird. And for everybody watching and listening out there, no, obviously it doesn't include you. You're amazing. You're magical. You are a unicorn underneath. Everyone else is weird. So we don't think the same way. We don't communicate the same way. We share a paragraph of information, and 3 people come up with 6 different definitions or interpretations of it. So I wonder whether over time, historically, partly again because of the whole capitalist need to make more money or desire to make more, and numbers are easier to understand. They don't have emotions. They don't have wants and needs. They're just there. I don't know where I was going with that, but yeah. So that idea of how much, from your perspective, how much influence has COVID had on the swing more towards the people side?
Oh, that is a great question.
Oh, really? I just came up with that. Yay!
I love it.
Everything is about me, by the way, Alena, if you haven't already realised that.
There has to be a star of the show, Graham. Why not be you?
Because Jez will edit this out later. That's what he does, because he's good.
I think COVID forced a lot of things. Yeah, so I'm just going to talk to some examples because I don't have a headline answer to that question. But the first thing that comes to mind is it forced empathy around people's work lives and their personal lives, and how that might interact or not with their work lives. So just the very nature of having an office, having a separate room that you can use as an office space is a privilege, and not everybody had that. And COVID forced us to recognize that, right? We were all socially disconnected.
Yeah.
And fortunately, every organization that I know of, whether or not they believed in it, because that was what we were being told in the narrative, they all went, we've got to do something about this social connection.
Yep.
And so that's where we saw the kind of Friday afternoon bingos and all of those fun online games came online. The water cooler conversation had to be more intentionally managed, right? Because there was no water cooler anymore. So I think what it did, Graham, I'm just kind of riffing on this a little bit, is it forced us to be more intentional about the people's side that we would ordinarily take for granted. And that forced really interesting conversations. It forced the people that didn't want change to be really uncomfortable. We are still talking about work from home. Why are we still talking about work from home? It's just a stupid conversation, right? But that's okay. It is okay to have uncomfortable conversations. It's okay for people to express unpopular opinions. But what we want is, to do people right. Let's have the uncomfortable conversation. Let's be intentional about what business outcomes we want.
Yep.
And let's just be human about getting there. And I think to kind of land the plane here, I think COVID forced us to bring a more human approach into the workplace.
Yeah, it's a great perspective. I appreciate that. Thank you. I'm going to stop talking now because I'm conscious that some of our other team have also asked some great questions, and otherwise, yeah, we'll be here. Are you okay to go through until 6-ish? Does that work for you?
I'll riff. I'm okay as long as at about 3 the wine comes out. It's fine.
That would be wine with a H because I don't do yeah, doesn't matter. Cheers. I'll hand back to you. Thanks, Alena.
Yeah,
worries,
no,
Graham.
that's interesting though. That was such an interesting little detour because it's so fascinating that the time when we were least connected and had the least human interaction was when the time that we had to most be thinking about it and intentional about it and realize how important it is to the business. So it's kind of a fascinating little tangent to go down. So yeah, no, I loved it.
I think it's really, Jez, can I just add something? I think it's really fascinating that we actually didn't learn the lesson. So we actually defaulted back to some of those poor behaviors. So I think that's, for me, that's probably the disappointing thing, is that we kind of forced ourselves into this way of behaving that was more human and intentional. And as soon as COVID didn't exist, and I know that's a silly statement, we kind of defaulted back. So I don't actually think that at scale we learned the lesson.
Well, that's really fascinating, Alena, and I think it actually leads perfectly into Allegra's question, our graphic designer, so and animator, who you'll notice for the intros and outros of things. So Allegra's written on this kind of topic. What are some business traits that show your business is in the sweet spot for the real math of business?
Yeah, I loved that question. It's such a challenging question, Allegra. So I'm grateful that you asked it because, as I said at the beginning, I don't have, this is not the real math of business is this, right? I don't have that. What I can tell you about the business traits is they do align with this idea that businesses are, success is when you've got a business where people serve people and the math just works. So where the numbers, the dollars, are a natural consequence of the work that the people do. In terms of the business traits, what I would say is that each individual in the business has a high sense of maturity. And it's commercial maturity, it's intellectual humility, it is, they understand, to Graham's point, that people are weird and that's okay. Our job is just to keep learning, keep listening, keep being interested, and working together. I think, that's one of the things. The other thing is, and this is so, I find this so fascinating. So I remember when I first got out into the speaking circuit, and that's actually where Danette and I first met, is I would do just a very quick, hands up, hands down sort of situation. And I'd say, hands up if you know the company purpose. And most people would put their hands up. Keep your hands up if you know your team purpose. If not, put your hand down. You'd probably get about 75% of the people put their hands down. So you've got 25% of the initial people, let's say around 90%, 25% of the 90% have still got their hands up, which is not many. And then I would say, keep your hands up if you know your personal purpose. Like, I literally could count the number of people that still had their hands up on one hand. Now, that was a reasonably long time ago, right? So I would say that the number, the whole number will be higher, but the relative percentages are probably similar. And the reason why that is important to answer Allegra's question is that the business traits are that each individual in the organization understands how their personal purpose or vision, whatever word they want to use, aligns to and connects with the organizational vision or purpose. So they understand how what they do matters to them and how what they do matters to the business in the context of what the business say matters to the business. I'll go kind of back to I think, Graham, maybe you said it, was, people say a paragraph, and that, could be the vision statement, the purpose statement, and in a town hall, and the CEO goes, yeah, high five team, we've communicated the vision, everyone's aligned and on the bus, that bus that everyone gets on. But everybody walks away, and their interpretation of some very common words, respect, integrity, value, customers, everyone's got a different definition of it, right? And so I just think so what I mean by that is they have that alignment, and that alignment is at a deep and articulated level. It's not at a shallow, this is my language and this is the company language, and luckily we've got some of the same words, and so we're good. And then the final thing I'll just say on this, and luckily we've got an adapt expert on this call, is that the employees themselves are adaptable. Because that is, I think, probably the number one power move you need to have in individuals today, is to be adaptable, to be agile, to be flexible. Because we don't know what's happening around the corner. We do not know the next silver shiny toy that we need to adopt. We do not know what shock is around the corner. And so I would say, from a business trait perspective, one of the most important things at an individual level is that adaptability and agility, because if you've got people aligned and you've got people that are agile, they can get anything.
Yeah, I love that. And actually, Danette, as the adaptability expert, is there anything that's coming to mind for you that you wanted to chat about here?
No, I totally agree with Alena. And that whole thing about the language, that, we do use words that we think mean exactly the same to other people. And if we don't get that deep understanding amongst ourselves of what respect actually means, you can have people who are really trying their hardest to do their best, and their definition of respect might be turning up on time to a meeting, and the person next to them is checking in on everyone at the start of the meeting, and those two might conflict with one another. Both are trying to show respect, and then you've got friction, which makes it hard to be adaptable. So that depth of understanding, why we're here, what's my purpose, how does it align with the organisation, and how do we create that common language, super duper important. And I really liked Elena's bit a little bit before, where she was talking about, you get your people right and the money happens. And so creating that environment to allow your people to have those deep conversations, to be able to adapt within the policies and procedures we have, but looking at those policies and procedures and not stopping people, because sometimes those systems within organisations actually stop the people from being adaptable as well. That's my bit anyway.
Fantastic. Thanks for that, Danette. No, love that. And I mean, Alena, there's so many other conversations I'm interested in having now. Like even that concept of maturity as a word, and even your definition around that is kind of a whole thing.
Well, very quickly, if you want me just to touch on that, I think it was Alan's question around what happens when people are too people or numbers focused. We see the commercial maturity come up when the company has gone to the people side, and we got the people right, and everyone's happy, and we're singing Kumbaya together and all of those things. And suddenly we stop hitting the numbers. And then somebody, God forbid, tries to have a conversation about numbers, and then suddenly people are throwing toys out of the cot. Oh, I thought we were a for-purpose company. Oh, I thought we did this. Oh, I didn't think we worried about the numbers. And it's like, guys, we just need to grow up. Like, we're running a business here. And so that commercial maturity, I think there's this, and this is early thinking. So don't quote me on it. I don't have a thesis on it yet, but I am exploring the idea of a company money mindset, and I guess a company money culture. Because, we're not talking about personal finances here at all. But like I said, with respect to, we're all humans that just turn up to work. We bring our money mindsets and beliefs and risk tolerances into work as well. So when you think around sitting in a table, around a table in a team, and you're talking about something that has some sort of financial expenditure or financial consequence or whatever, and you've got 5 different people who, outside of work, have 5 different financial upbringings. They are in 5 different financial circumstances. They're at 5 different stages of lives. And we all know here that each different stage of life brings around a different, like we're all bringing these subconscious ideas about money. You can't tell me that's not going to influence the nature of that conversation and the decisions that are made as a result. So I think there's something, so the commercial maturity is also sort of part of this concept that I'm exploring around a corporate money mindset, which is basically how do we bring our our personal money beliefs into our role, and how does a company deal with that? It's almost just another lens of bias, and bias is a big topic for organizations. It's almost bringing another lens to that.
What I love about that, Alena, is people, like I see this definitely in the work I do, people get triggered by money and they're then not able to have those deep conversations because that subconscious programming is playing out. So I love that being intentional, and I love you've used intentional a couple of times in the conversation about the real math of business, is that intentionality about this is probably a blind spot in pretty much every organisation. So I can't wait for our discussions on that one.
Me too.
Yes, we'll have to have you back, Alena, for a whole nother combo, another crossover rep in the future. Well, Alena, I might go to my question now because I do want to talk a little bit about your podcast as to how it relates to this kind of theory that you've been developing. And, I think each week you're exploring, a different lens on the topic. So for me, my question is, you've been exploring this sort of topic on the Real Math of Business podcast with Alena Bennett, which people can go subscribe to now. If you're not from that side, go check it out. What has been the most surprising thing about the topic that you've learned through doing the podcast?
Well, I didn't have any preconceived notions about what I was going to get. And I'll be really transparent. The Magical Learning podcast and the Danette FM podcast has been a real inspiration because, I quite often hear, particularly from Danette, I just love having interesting conversations with smart people. So really, if I'm really honest, the Real Math of Business podcast was so I could have really interesting conversations with smart people. Like, it's awesome. And I have an idea about the Real Math of Business. It is called the Real Math of Business, underline italics, quote marks, for a reason, because I think there is a belief that we have all bought into from our education and from the context that the math of business is money, is financial success, is profit, all of those things, right? And so the realness is like, let's just get real about what it really is. Like, let's just have some real conversations. I'm not going to tell you what it is because your business is different to my business is different to, but let's just get real. That's kind of what we're trying to do here. And in my opinion, the Real Math of Business is a combination of math and people. What has been most surprising, and you know this, Jez, because for most of our podcasts, I share this at the end, is I sort of have this little tanty. Why did we spend that whole conversation talking about people? Why couldn't we get them to talk about the maths? And I think that's been most surprising, right? Because these are very senior leaders in business that are making lots and lots of money for their businesses, right? So they are focused on the numbers. They are focused on the money. Yet one of the things that has probably been the most surprising, and, when you're the podcast host trying to explore the interaction or the tension or the balance between two things, and you're so heavily weighted on another, you're like, oh, I just want to tip it. I want to get to the other side. But it almost proves the point a little bit that we've been talking about today. We do want businesses where people serve people, and we kind of don't really want to have to think about the maths. We just want it to work. And I think that's probably been a bit of a standout in terms of what has been most surprising and pleasing, I think. And I guess that's what I hope for everyone who listens, that they listen and have hope at the end. And so what I expect, and the podcast is still relatively new, but I sort of hope that at some point there is a bit of a groundswell in acceptance and somebody goes, let's cut the crap, guys. Let's let's stop talking short-term profits. Let's stop talking about short-term earnings. Let's start actually thinking about businesses as organisms, engines, vehicles where people serve people, whether that be staff, customers, suppliers, society. People serve people, and the maths is just a consequence. And yeah, you might have to wait another 3 months for the numbers that you want, but that's okay. Yeah, it was a long way of answering your question, Jez.
No, but that really goes to the whole point of the podcast, I think, is exactly what you're talking about. You know, like we had one that sticks out to me just because of the position is Steve Vamos from Xero, where you think that's all numbers. You know, that's a sort of accounting software. And yet the whole conversation was about people. Exactly what you're saying. We couldn't peel him off the people side of it because that's the most sort of important part, even as someone coming from such a numbers heavy area as he was.
Yeah, 100%. 100%. And even, even if I reflect on the pod we did most recently with Bill Withers, he really struggled with it. And the reason why he struggled with it was because he does people differently. And I think it's genius what he's created. His people, his people stuff, the people stuff is all numbers driven, or it's numbers backed by numbers. So he was having a really hard time going, I just don't see how this all works, because for me, people and numbers, actually, the people side is people backed by numbers and the maths is just separate. And so that was a really cool conversation, because I think this is what I love is I don't know the answer. I don't know what people are going to tell me. And I think what it proves to me, which is why I love business, is that everyone can do it their own way, and that's okay.
Absolutely. And that podcast people can check out that you had with Bill Withers is the one that you can check out last week on the Real Math of Business podcast. So people should go check that out, subscribe and check out that one. Well, Alena, look, I think we're going to have you back on because we've got more questions, but we've run out of time here for this chat. So I want to grab some final thoughts before we wrap up from the team here at the Magical Learning side, and then we'll grab some final thoughts from you, Alena. But I might start with Graham. Graham, did you have any final thoughts on today's conversation?
No.
Easy. And Danette, no.
Where to start? Lots of notes. Look, it's been a fantastic conversation, Alena. Thank you. And great questions from everybody. I really appreciate it. Towards the back end, we were talking about, sorry, you were sharing the challenge you found, and it sounds like Bill Withers might have been sort of an example, but a lot of the conversations you're having with senior people, if I understood what you were saying correctly, lately seem to be much more people-centric, and it's really hard to get them away from that. And I on one level, I think, well, it's not really surprising at all, given the focus at almost at a species level that we've had since COVID on people, and all of the things relating to diversity, equity, and inclusion. I'm wondering whether there is a what will you call it, the DEI of maths in business. I had to put the S on the maths just because I'm old. But look, I love some of the stuff that's sort of bubbling away in the back of your amazing brain. It's not half a brain; it's probably 2.5 brains, just crammed into a small space. And isn't it just an absolute blessing that you were never really good at maths?
Right. Thank you. I might just take that soundbite, and every time I feel bad about myself, just listen to that.
Yeah, sure. Danette's pretty much the same. Anyway, look, it's been fantastic. So thank you. I've thoroughly enjoyed the conversation. And yes, you do need to come back for, maybe we just have a 24-hour. What's the Guinness Book of Records in podcast duration, Jez?
That's actually a great question. I should know that off the top of my head. So I have a world record to aim at for a.
I think we should do that.
If we ever need to just rack one up, that's a potential.
Yeah, I'll get the comfy chair out and some popcorn and stuff racked up, and Alena, you can organise somebody to bring in some vino at the appropriate time.
Sounds great.
Thank you.
No problem. Thank you, Graham. And great questions today. Thank you so much for being on the pod. I'll throw to Danette. Danette, did you have any final thoughts on today's conversation?
Yeah, so Ella and I both have the bent about people focusing short term when really way better to focus that long term. And I really, really can't wait to explore this with you, Alena, the bit about the company money mindset and the company culture around that, because that is definitely an area that needs exploration, because that short-term focus, I get it, you've got shareholders and stuff like that, but often that skews decisions that end up costing the business longer term, not just from a financial perspective. So fabulous conversation. Can't wait for our next catch up next week. That's Eleanor and I, not the whole podcast. And can't wait to have you back on the podcast too. Thank you.
Thanks, Danette.
That's it. And we'll do the 24-hour podcast next week, guys. We'll just spit it out and spit out your convo into a 24-hour pod. No, Alena, I just want to say thanks so much. It's, like we get to talk most weeks just when we're doing the podcast off air, but it's always great to sort of get to chat to you on air, live and recorded. And I think something that I've taken away, even though we talk, quite a lot, is that just that simple idea that communication isn't talking. Like, you learn it so early, and, again, it's not a class. Psychology is probably the closest you find to it at school, but it's not a communication class per se. But how much it's expected across the board for everybody. It's such an important skill outside of everything else that we've been talking today, and about the, so many different interesting things about the real math business. Highly recommend people go check that podcast out as well if you're coming from the magical learning side. Alena, before we sort of wrap up here, did you have any final thoughts on today's conversation?
No, other than thank you for the great questions. I might actually ask a question back to the team if that's okay, but I will say thank you for these questions, because there is nothing like a question requiring you to try and be articulate about this. And so this has been, having this conversation, being asked these questions has been really helpful for me. I've learned a lot to crystallize some of these ideas. So I'm very grateful to be here. My ask of the team is, what have I missed? Is there something out there that you're like, oh, you should explore that? What's the thing around the concepts that I've shared today that makes you go, oh, you could consider this blind spot or this blind spot?
I'd have to think on that overnight, Alena.
All right.
So we have to get you back so we can discuss that.
Oh, good. I like that idea. Beautiful.
Yeah.
Good setup. It's like we created it.
Great question. But that, I reckon, to answer it well, is I need a bit of time. So thank you.
Thank you.
That's part of the 24-hour podcast, I think, or longer if necessary. The corporate money mindset business thing. The point that you made about people bring their experience, knowledge, understanding, biases, etc., around money into their role in the workplace. We've always done that. And in the past, I think most businesses have been so money focused, they haven't even bothered to try and understand what people's values, attitudes, beliefs, etc., around money would be. It didn't come under consideration at all. And again, that's not a small thing. Just even exploring that, I think there's huge potential in that. It's a great idea. The corporate money mindset thing.
Thanks, Graham. And you've made me, it comes back to your earlier point. I appreciate that contribution, because what it's made me reflect on is your comment earlier around, numbers are relatively easy compared to people.
Yeah.
And you're right, because we've kind of swung, the Newton's cradle, we're swinging over to the people side more. There are just so many layers of the onion to peel when it comes to people, because we are so complex. So you're right. We've never had to peel back the onion and discover this stuff. And, today it might be corporate money mindset. There is going to be something else to peel back at some point too in the future. So yeah, thank you, Graham.
No, you're welcome.
Good thought provoker.
It's good question to start with. So.
And I think, Alena, my thing that I'm interested in exploring, it's something that can only be explored through time, but is capturing some of the data of the real math of business and starting to see it kind of as a sort of plot graph math of how people put ratios of some people will have 75% people, 25% numbers, how that ends up looking. Because, as someone who loves doing this for sport, like I love looking at basketball percentage matrices where it's like this person shoots the most but's the worst shooter, this person doesn't shoot much but is a good shooter, all these different ways you can plot maths. I'm really excited to see how, when we start gathering the data, how this ends up looking across different domains and how different people sort of use it. So, very excited to kind of see how this explores itself.
Awesome. Yeah, me too. I can't wait, Jez. That's going to be really interesting.
Yeah. Well, Alena, for people that are coming from the magical learning side, where's the best place if they've listened to this and they've gone, I need to listen to more Alena and I need to reach out and find out some more info. So, Alena, where's the best place for people to reach out to you?
LinkedIn. I'm on LinkedIn at least a few days a week. So that's easy. Just look up my name, Alena Bennett. My website is alenabennett.com.au. So you can always go on there, check me out a little bit more and shoot me a note through the website. But quite easy to find. Would be very happy to have a chat.
Great. And if they want a weekly check-in, they can always check out The Real Math of Business with Alena Bennett wherever you get your podcasts. And for people coming over from the Alena Bennett side, this is Magical Learning. This podcast is also a weekly podcast. You can follow and subscribe for us for weekly chats. We're going to talking to experts and finding out different information about them. Sometimes have authors, sometimes have business experts. This has been the Magical Learning podcast and The Real Math of Business. Alena, thank you so much.
Thank you so much for having me. It's been awesome.
Great. And regular team, thank you so much. Thank you so much, everybody, for listening.